Welcome to week 7 of the Yahoo Q&A. Here, of course, at Yahoo. As always, I am your host, John Daigle of Establish the Run. And we are here today to begin, per usual, with some week 7 questions. They don't have to be start-sit. They're always start-sit on a Friday. I know how it works, but they don't have to be. Nonetheless, I always like to begin with a Thursday takeaway at the top of the show, as those questions begin to roll in. And that means I'm going to begin with Jaylen Warren, not Jamar Chase. I will note that so far we've seen Chase, for example, have a 28.5% target share from Joe Burrow, a 27% target share from Jake Browning, and 41% from Joe Flacco. Last night, for example, Joe Flacco targeted T. Higgins and Chase on a combined 70% of the team's targets. If you're going to get that, then naturally that is a condensed target tree that will allow Chase and Higgins to get there every single week. That I did not expect, because some quarterbacks don't simply drop back and do the correct thing and only look at the best players. Browning, for example, had spread it out much further with multiple tight ends, Mason Tinsley even involved unnecessarily, when the target should go to only Chase and Higgins, which is so far what Flacco's done. So if that continues, Chase and Higgins will be amazing moving forward. But I think the most important takeaway is what happened with Jaylen Warren, actually. Because go back to week 3, when Jaylen Warren handled a season-high 80+% of the Steelers' backfield touches as an RB1. He deals with the knee injury. Kenneth Gainwell starts in Dublin in his place, and Kenneth Gainwell scores 31.4 fantasy points as a top 5 running back on the week. The Steelers go to bye in week 5. They come back in week 6 in a 3-headed timeshare. That includes Caleb Johnson also getting 6 carries, Kenneth Gainwell getting 6 targets in a 3-headed backfield that is unusable. Because when 3 players are getting involved for a poor offense like the Steelers, you just can't start any of them confidently as top 24 options. If you're desperate, sure, as a flex play during the bye weeks, that's fine. But Jaylen Warren was someone to shy away from. And then last night, out of nowhere, once again, week 7, Jaylen Warren goes back up to an 80% share of the team's backfield touches. His second highest mark of the season. And so if that's going to be how he's used moving forward, not always as easy of a matchups as the Bengals, for example, but if that's how he's going to be used moving forward, then that is a top 24 running back that we want. So you could even say Jaylen Warren, not that it'll be easy to quote-unquote buy him low at this time, but maybe he's a player you buy at the right price, because we can now see his ceiling weekly moving forward if that's how he's going to be used. So, with that being said, Jaylen Warren was a big winner based on his usage. Not even the results, just the usage from last night that we should have confidence in starting moving forward. Ari Clipper asks, Sam Darnold or Bo Nix, and that is Bo Nix for me, against a very poor Giants defense that we've seen now. Bo Nix, it's pretty predictable when he plays well. Like, simply put, is it a defense that can get pressure? Because if so, Bo Nix is going to play bad, since he's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league under pressure. But if it's a situation where we don't think the pocket's going to crumble frequently, then you can start Bo Nix and hope and cross your fingers you get the rushing upside. And with that being said, it's a game at home against a Giants defense that could be without some key starters in their front 7. And so I do favor the matchup for Bo Nix over Darnold, who is going to London now. And it's not a bad matchup for Darnold. It's still shocking, actually, that Darnold is available in most one-quarterback leagues when he should have been started weekly by now. But the Giants only 19th in pressure rate, so I'm fine starting Bo Nix in a nitpicking situation. London game, obviously. Always sketchy Not to mention, we should temper our expectations for everyone involved because the environment probably won't be as well, not only because they're traveling, but also without Puka Nacua, you really lose some of the power, the explosion, and the fireworks in that offense. So Doug W. asks, Pollard, Spears, or Charbonnet for running back. And that's obviously just asking about a committee, which is not good either way. Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet continue being used in a two-headed committee. And it's Charbonnet who is being used inside the 10-yard line over Walker. And so no one wins, really. Same thing for Pollard and Spears, where no one's winning because now we have two running backs involved in one of the worst and least efficient offenses in the leagues. Having said that, Spears was actually the guy they used in negative game script as the player with more upside. I've said it multiple times on this show throughout the year, but you want to chase targets, not carries, to a certain extent, right? Relative. You can use your own brain when someone's getting 3 targets but no carries and someone else is getting 15 carries. Of course, then you want carries. So use your brain, please. But targets are worth 1.5 fantasy points. Carries are worth 1, even in standard leagues, because that's how important receiving usage is. That's how a running back unlocks their ceiling. And there's a wide range of outcomes with Mike McCoy now taking over play calling and offense for the Titans. That range of outcomes includes Tajay Spears out-touching Tony Pollard as the team's RB1 altogether. So in this case, I will just start Tajay Spears, thinking I'm going to think of receiving usage instead of the inefficient running back targets that are happening for the Seahawks. For example, the Seattle running backs have the lowest target rate, their backfield in the entire league. Just not getting targets at all from Darnold as he continues to launch downfield to solely JSN. Let's see here. Uncle Ted says a Juju Smith-Schuster split. That's pretty bad considering Rashee Rice is coming back. So we don't really care about Juju Smith-Schuster with Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, and Xavier Worthy now all at full strength. So let's move on. Heath Jones asks about, after week 8, is Puka still the wide receiver 1 overall? And yes, absolutely is. For the thing is, for about Puka Nacua, is that obviously the wide receiver 1 to this point, but only expected to miss week 8, which we've always expected the moment he had that injury. And we knew the bye week was coming up in week 8 for him. So we're expecting Puka to come back at full strength in week 9. And from that point forward, be a wide receiver 1. I can't imagine anyone who has Puka wants to actually trade him, considering, again, he's the wide receiver 1 for the rest of the season, very clearly. In any like 1-for-1 Jonathan Taylor for Puka trade, 1-for-1 Puka for Bijan Robinson, it depends on the strength of your running backs, of course, but no one would bat an eye. That's clearly a fine trade. If you needed a wide receiver, Puka can be the 101 the rest of the way quite easily. So I can't imagine anyone would trade him, but if there's a team for some reason that's 1-5, 2-4, and feels like they have to in order, because it's a win now situation and they can't afford not having Puka for 2 games, then of course, just like we did with CeeDee Lamb, like you should be doing with Brock Bowers, then yes, definitely try and trade for Puka. In terms of who replaces Puka in London in week 7, it's split between Tutu Atwell and Jordan Whittington. You can flex both. Tutu obviously was not available last week and Puka got injured, so the splits are skewed. But if you go back to last year when both were available and Puka was out, it was Tutu Atwell who led the Rams with a 22% target share and 11.4 fantasy points per game. That iteration of the Rams offense, of course, had Cooper Kupp, so it's entirely different this year. Devontae Adams now is going to soak up a majority of the team's targets. Obviously, it's a small sample, but in the 45 plays without Puka on the field this year, Devontae Adams has a 33% target share. He just takes on Puka's target share as a whole because he's that good. But the secondary option is flex plays. Yes. Tutu Atwell, Jordan Whittington. I will note, even though I think Tutu personally is the better play, it's nitpicking. They're neck and neck. The coverage splits do favor Whittington, and that Jacksonville's run the fourth highest rate of zone coverage, 70% of their defensive snaps. We know what they do weekly. And Jordan Whittington's yards per route run have increased to 43rd in the league against zone compared to 107th against man coverage, because he's not an individual who can beat you one-on-one, but he's a possession receiver who can find space. So again, totally fine with both of them. And both are just flex plays, nothing more. Similar to the Bucs situation, since it's looking like, well, we know Emeka Puka and Chris Godwin are going to be out. We're still waiting on Evans. Today was a natural rest day for Evans, who didn't practice on Friday. So we didn't really learn anything new. I expect him to play, but either way, it's going to be Tez Johnson and Sterling Shepard that are similar plugins to Jordan Whittington and Tutu Atwell. Chance Cunningham asks, would you start Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison or pick up Kendrick Bourne? I would start Kendrick Bourne over Jordan Addison. You're obviously not benching Justin Jefferson, especially because we're waiting on the Eagles injury report. It seems like they're going to have Jalen Carter and Kenyon Mitchell, but we don't know just yet. And they are a team that, even going back to last week, have leaked big plays without those two individuals on the field. So we're waiting, but Carson Wentz starting gives hope to Justin Jefferson. And honestly, it just gives hope that this can be a shootout, since the Vikings have been struggling immensely against running backs this year, including the Kenneth Gainwell game in Dublin that I mentioned. And so it seems like the best spot that Saquon Barkley's had all year, indoors, as opposed to a few games that we're concerned about weather. We don't worry about weather or do start-sit questions about weather on Friday because, as we know, especially you live in the Midwest, weather changes in a blink of an eye, so who cares about predicting it for Sunday? But the Vikings game, at least indoors. So starting Justin Jefferson, obviously, and I would gladly start Kendrick Bourne over Jordan Addison now that Ricky Pearsall is out and we're just unclear about Juwan Jennings' participation. But even then, last week, Jennings ran just 3 fewer routes than Bourne, and it was still Bourne who once again finished as a top 12 wide receiver. Now, back-to-back games of 23 and 24% target share from Mac Jones, who's also going to start. So, love getting Kendrick Bourne in there as once again another top 12 play for the third consecutive week in a row. Nay Deezy asks, should I try to trade Jaylen Warren for Bucky Irving or Genty? Thinking Bucky comes back after the bye. Yeah, so I'm expecting personally, since we haven't seen Puka, Godwin, or Bucky Irving go on injured reserve, I'm expecting them all to once again miss next week, go on bye in week 9, and come back week 10. So, if that's the case, you're really just asking yourself, can you afford to not have either Jaylen Warren or Bucky Irving, since you'd be trading for Bucky Irving in this scenario for the next 21 days? So this Sunday, 2 more games. No, this Sunday and 2 more weeks, including the bye week. Yes, I want Bucky Irving over Jaylen Warren rest of season. But you have to look at your own roster and ask yourself that. Can you go without a starting running back if you had planned on starting Warren or Bucky? Because again, not expecting Bucky, Puka, Godwin, I don't even know when or if he's coming back. But definitely Puka and Bucky, we're not going to see till week 10. So go from there with that question. Tone Neg asks, desperate at RB2, Henderson, Woody Marks, or Tajay Spears. And I think given the matchup, I would go Travion Henderson. I don't really we talked about this last week. I don't really pay too much attention to Woody Marks basically being forgotten about behind Nick Chubb, because anytime the Texans pat Dameon Pierce on the head and tell him to play professional football, you know they're just not paying attention to that game. And the Ravens aren't an NFL team. Like, legitimately, they're a AAA team without Lamar Jackson, plus all the injuries they have. So even Dameon Pierce got involved in that game. Weird game script. Seattle at least allowing a top 5 rate of catches per game to opposing running backs. That's obviously Woody Mark's specialty and trait. So we are nitpicking here. But I do think Travion Henderson now, in being in a two-headed backfield, no more Antonio Gibson, and also Henderson has only had 4 fewer touches than Ramondre Stevenson since Gibson went down. So it's also still a timeshare and a favorable game script against, again, one of the worst offenses in the league in the Titans, that I do think Marks and Henderson are going to get a similar workload, and it's at least an easier matchup for Henderson. So splitting hairs, nitpicking, but I will take Henderson if we're assuming the Patriots and Vrabel blow out the Titans in a revenge game. Brian Martinez asked, DJ Moore or Juwan Jennings? That is DJ Moore for me, who got cleared off the practice report, a better matchup. Olamide Zaccheaus still has 2 more targets than DJ Moore on the entire season, but it's still a terrific matchup against the Saints, where we know the Saints are 28th in pressure rate. They literally cannot get pressure on any quarterback. And that's exactly what we saw last week as well with Drake May. All 3 of his touchdown passes for 14 yards per attempt were from a clean pocket whenever the Saints just couldn't get there. Caleb Williams also has still been terrific this year from a clean pocket. So I am going to go DJ Moore over Juwan Jennings, since we just can't trust Juwan Jennings right now at all, pretty much. Let's see. Jeffrey J. Start. I don't know what this means. I'm just going to say start, because I don't know start sit 2 means. So start either Dowdle or Vidal, and Browns D or Seattle. You're starting Dowdle, but we do have lower expectations for him just because there's a wide range of outcomes. If Dowdle was out-touched by Chuba Hubbard, it wouldn't be shocking at all. If Dowdle handles 70% of the team's running back touches, it wouldn't be shocking at all. But I just don't know how we can bench Dowdle right now with Chuba Hubbard at full strength. I don't know how we can bench Dowdle after, setting the Panthers franchise record over Christian McCaffrey in yards from scrimmage in a 2-game stretch. I just don't. I can't personally do it. Like, Vidal honestly probably projects better than Dowdle, but I personally can't get myself to bench Dowdle. So if you can suck it up, I do think Vidal is probably like a better start, probably projects better, but I'm going to take on personally the range of outcomes and understand if Dowdle gets 8 carries, I wouldn't be shocked at all. But I'm going to suck it up and still take it on. And then Browns D or Seattle D. I'm still going to go Browns D against the Dolphins. Tua can't throw the ball in perfect weather, and now it could be a storm against the Browns front 7. So I think you just don't overthink it, and you start the Browns. Keenan Allen for Marvin Harrison. Who wins the trade? I think Marvin Harrison wins the trade. We've now seen the pendulum and Keenan Allen's production go down in consecutive games, 4 consecutive games. Not to mention, as long as Oronde Gadsden is getting involved, the target tree becomes flatter as opposed to more condensed, which is worrisome for everyone, even Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey will be fine, but if he doesn't have the 42-yard touchdown, which really masked otherwise not a great day last week, we're talking about him differently this week. So I am concerned for Keenan Allen moving forward, considering Gadsden is continuing to emerge. His route participation has increased in all games he's played, 4 consecutive games, including last week's season high 86% mark. So, yeah, I think I would take on Marvin Harrison the rest of the season. Maybe not even expecting Harrison to break out, but I'd rather take on the chance of Marvin Harrison from Jacoby Brissett since it seems like we might not see Kyler Murray for a few more weeks, not only just Sunday, but a couple more weeks. Need one spot start between a lot of options. Alec Pierce, Tez Johnson, Sterling Shepard, Jordan Whittington, Tutu Atwell, or Juwan Jennings. I think I'd go Tez Johnson personally. Put it this way. We don't know if Mike Evans is going to play. If Mike Evans is out, I go Tez Johnson. If Mike Evans plays, I think I go Tutu Atwell over Juwan Jennings for the aforementioned target share. You're going to find out by Saturday, most likely. One, if Evans participates, that means he's probably going to play Monday, and so you can hold it out. But if Evans is out, doesn't practice again Saturday, he's out, then I'm going to go Tez Johnson. Jakey 2JS asks, Drake May or Jared Goff, and it's Drake May. We are not running away from Drake May, the QB4 in points per game. Pretty much start him every single week, especially with a guy like Jared Goff who's outside the top 12 in points per game. Goff's like only QB1 performances continue to be when he's thrown 3 and 5 touchdowns this year. So Drake May very, very easily over Jared Goff. Not a question. Doug W. Is Atlanta a solid defense rest of season? That's fine. I don't really consider any defense rest of season because they're always available. And I just play matchups. Ask anyone who's had like the Broncos defense, for example. You just play matchups because defense are so fragile and are genuinely just opposing quarterback based. Can you play Atlanta every single week? Sure. And I'm in some leagues where I don't even make the effort. It's not worth the errand of me picking up another defense. Even if there's a better matchup available, it's just not worth it. Because then we're talking about like the defense 4, defense 5 on the week. Whatever. I can't choose between. No one can. Macro points like that, guessing 0.4 or 0.5 more points than the next defense. So are they a good rest of season? Yeah, you can lock them in. Will there be better available streamers from time to time? Yes. But you can still play Atlanta every single week if you wanted to. They are trending out towards the top 2 defense and EPA per play right now. Dustin Stone with a kicker question. Bates, Bucker, Fairbairn. I'm just going to look at the matchups and say I think the Bucker matchup is best given the Chiefs' week high team total. If Debo gets ruled out, flex Vidal, Golden, or Tet. Oh, so you're assuming you would play Debo if that's the case. It'd definitely be Tet McMillan. We got a really encouraging shift in usage from Tet McMillan last week. To this point, through week 5, before the Panthers played the Cowboys, Tetaroa had as many end zone targets as Hunter Renfrow and Xavier Lee get. Terrible usage by the Panthers. For a player who comps like Mike Evans, you can't be wasting time giving other players end zone targets. That just wastes Tet McMillan's upside. But then last week, he matched that total in one game from Bryce Young, and he obviously scored 2 touchdowns on those 3 end zone targets. So hopefully, it's a one-game sample, but I'm hoping they saw how to properly use Tetaroa. And if so, that's going to unlock his ceiling. Everyone knows about his 23% target share, 41% of the air yards. That doesn't matter because he still wasn't a top 12 wide receiver weekly because he wasn't used inside the red zone. If he's finally going to get used inside the red zone, that's a player you should actually buy high on because now his top 12 ceiling will be unlocked. So let's hope they figured it out and they'll continue to hammer him inside the red zone and end zone for touchdowns. Spot start. We're going to rule out Jalen Coker. We don't play players coming back from injury in the first game. Burden loses value now that DJ Moore is back. Travis Hunter or Bucks Rams. I think it's Travis Hunter, who we've now seen his route participation increase in 4 consecutive games, including last week's season high 85% mark. Not to mention he's a player they're trying to get more involved, and without Akello Witherspoon for the Rams the past few games, they are leaking major production to wide receiver ones. Wide receiver 1 for Jacksonville is obviously Brian Thomas Jr., but I think the Jaguars' top 2 receivers can have some success, and those are all such fringe plays around him. I'll just take the better talent in Travis Hunter. Any concerns, Dustin Stone asks, about Swift and Jacobs' status? No. DeAndre Swift already said he's going to play, so I'm assuming that means he's going to play. And Josh Jacobs also seems like he's going to power through and play. So no questions, barring like some surprising Saturday downgrades. No issues for Swift and Jacobs this week. If Debo is out, which wide receivers should we pick up? Luke McCaffrey or Chris Moore? It would be Chris Moore. Chris Moore has operated the last few games, 3 games without Terry McLaurin, as their wide receiver 2. He's run around in over 70% of dropbacks, where actually the last 3 games, Luke McCaffrey has run just one more route than Jaylen Lane. They're kind of being used the same, except McCaffrey's the one who's had a couple big touchdowns the past few games. A 55-yard touchdown 2 weeks ago, 33-yard last week. But he hasn't really earned more opportunity for those big touchdowns. And we also know big touchdowns, very fluky. We don't chase that. But if we're asking who would be used more if Deebo Samuel was ruled out, first of all, you can flex Chris Moore now that Terry McLaurin has been ruled out, since we know he's going to play in 2 wide receiver sets. The Cowboys defense is a college one. Everyone gets there every week. So I already don't mind starting Chris Moore this week, regardless of Deebo Samuel's status. If Deebo Samuel's ruled out, though, I would imagine it then becomes Luke McCaffrey on the outside and Jaylen Lane playing more of a slot role as he did in college. So I think in order, it would be Chris Moore, Luke McCaffrey, and Jaylen Lane. Zach Ertz, a wide receiver 1, obviously, regardless. But if Deebo Samuel's ruled out in terms of the actual wide receivers, Chris Moore than Luke McCaffrey. Fannin or Hunter? No idea which Hunter, Daryl G, since that's a Hunter Henry or Travis Hunter. I'm going to guess you're asking about the tight ends. So I'm going to assume you're saying Fannin or Hunter Henry. And that is Fannin this week, but Hunter Henry rest of season, just because if Jerry Jeudy were to return, when David Njoku returns, we're getting back to the same thing that did not allow Harold Fannin to be a top 12 play, and that is 6 different players in a wide target tree from bad quarterback play. That's why we haven't been able to start Harold Fannin the last month. It's because the same thing. This week, Harold Fannin obviously over Hunter Henry because David Njoku has been ruled out, so we now get to see Harold Fannin be an every down tight end. That's naturally, like Michael Mayer last week, going to let him be a natural top 12 option easily. You start Harold Fannin every time David Njoku's out. But when Njoku and Jerry Jeudy are back, the target tree's too big to feed one player. So this week, Harold Fannin, rest of the season, Hunter Henry. Dylan Vaughn asks, a lot of wide receivers, got to pick one very easily, A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown over the rest of these individuals. We are seeing some promising uptick in opportunity for the Eagles, who now, Jalen Hurts has been over 30 pass attempts in 3 of the last 4 games. So I'm still fighting for A.J. Brown, who outside of week 1 has a 31% target share in his rest of his full games around that. So he's getting the targets. The volume's ticking up. I still think A.J. Brown is a good buy low player to cross our fingers that naturally the Eagles will figure it out even more and continue leaning into Jalen Hurts and allowing them to go downfield. So I'm still starting A.J. Brown. Let's see here. Thoughts? No. Oh, choose. So basically sit one. 1 wide receiver, 1 running back, 1 flex between Golden, Sutton, Otten, Marks, and Vidal. And that is going to be, we are starting Golden, Sutton, and Vidal quite easily. Cade Otten is cute. He's a fine play, but he's also a fragile tight end who we also don't expect to see the same production as last week if Mike Evans plays. And Woody Marks, we know the volatility. I don't mind starting Woody Marks when we have to. But with this kind of situation where Vidal, there's no reason for the team to bench him. I don't like it can always happen, as we saw with Michael Carter, even though Michael Carter was played badly a couple of weeks ago. He had 2.8 yards per carry. You were only chasing the touches, but because he played bad, the rug got pulled out from underneath him, and then he didn't get the touches anymore. I didn't expect that to happen for Vidal, who handled 75% of the team's running back touches. He had the fifth highest rate of 10-yard carries among all running backs last week. There's really no reason for him to lose his role. So I'll start him this week over Vidal over Marks, because I think that projection is more solid than trying to project for Marks this week. Not to mention Matthew Golden, at least we saw, it's not much, but we saw a season high 19.5% target share. Cortland Sutton's in a top 12 spot. Sutton has a top 10 in yards per out run against man coverage, which the Giants play a majority of. We knew Sutton's match week was tougher last week against the Jets. The Jets that funnel targets, we talked about this last week, to wide receiver twos. Sutton's back in a man-on-man role coverage scheme here, so Sutton's going to blow up in this game. But it really just comes down to Vidal or Marks, so I'm picking Vidal in that situation. Thoughts on a trade? Giving up Justin Jefferson and Javonte Williams for CMC and Addison, basically. I would actually go, I think I'd go Quentin Johnston in that trade over Jordan Addison or Xavier Worthy, since the third-year breakout for Quentin Johnston is what's happening. There's no reason to believe that it's been a fluke since Quentin Johnston developed in year 2 in his first season under Jim Harbaugh, and he's now broken out in year 3 for a first-round wide receiver. That happens all the time. It's very common. So I would actually take Quentin Johnston over Jordan Addison, Javonte Williams, over Jordan Addison and Xavier Worthy, just because Jordan Addison, I'm very worried when J.J. McCarthy comes back, since he showed in the limited sample he couldn't carry anyone, even Justin Jefferson. And the Vikings have, based on this year's defensive metrics, the toughest schedule for the rest of the season. So I think Jordan Addison's going to lose a lot of value when J.J. McCarthy comes back, since he can only support, in my opinion, one wide receiver. That is Justin Jefferson, obviously. And it's a small sample, but we've seen, one, it's going to be, I believe, a more spread out target tree with Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Hollywood Brown back in the fold together. Travis Kelce also. But like when push comes to shove, Rashee Rice is a superior player, the best player in that offense, and he's going to earn his targets, and the rest will kind of be spread out. Xavier Worthy will probably get a few carries. We'll keep him a higher floor, but I still want Quentin Johnston over Xavier Worthy rest of season. Let's see. Daryl asks, Murray, Fields, or Purdy rest of season. Purdy was dropped. It would be Purdy, just because without Garrett Wilson now the next couple of weeks, I don't know what the passing looks like for Justin Fields, since it was already bad to begin with. But Purdy is also not going to start this week on Sunday Night Football. We've already heard rumors that it's going to be Mac Jones. So, like, we're asking two quarterbacks who aren't playing this week in Kyler Murray and Brock Purdy versus Justin Fields rest of season. So I guess rest of season, I'm going to say Brock Purdy, but we're hoping Purdy comes back next week. I can't guarantee that. The 49ers don't have a bye until week 14. Fannin or Otten? Very easily Fannin. Let's see here. Brian Thomas Jr. or A.J. Brown, rest of season. I think it's Brian Thomas Jr., barely. I think it's Brian Thomas Jr. At least we're seeing the target share has always been there. A.J. Brown's the same thing. But the offense, like, we're still, in buying A.J. Brown low, we're buying a ceiling talent that we know can be a top 12 player. But we're also buying into volatility. That's why it's buying low, because you don't feel good doing it, but you understand who A.J. Brown is if the dominoes all fall correctly. So at least with Brian Thomas Jr., like, You already bought low. The ceiling's there. We've now seen it in back-to-back games. So Brian Thomas Jr., I think, is the safer play rest of season, Kyle. I like both of them. Please pick 2 between Jordan Mason, Rico Dowdle, Jameson Williams, Kamani Vidal. I think I would go Jordan Mason for sure. That's an easy one. With Aaron Jones still out. But Jordan Mason, so it's basically Rico Dowdle or Kamani Vidal. And like I said earlier, I do think Rico Dowdle, I just can't. I cannot bench him. You probably should. But I can't bench him for Kamani Vidal. So I'm going to say Rico Dowdle. Another Vidal question or DeAndre Swift. Swift if he plays, and it sounds like, again, he's going to play. So I am sticking with DeAndre Swift over Vidal. We talk about post-buy usage bumps. That's actually what Swift got among all players for the Bears. Like, yeah, Luther Burden, it was fine. He got to a season-high 41% route participation, 14% target share. That's great. It's going to grow, but it's not there yet to the point where, like, you have to start him. DeAndre Swift, though, it was season highs in everything across the board. Like, they came out using him much more frequently. So very encouraged about that against a very soft Saints defense. Even if it were to rain this upcoming game, obviously then that would help the running backs and running situations. So still like Swift over Vidal. JM asks, thoughts on sending Tet for Mahomes, Rice, Nico, and quarterback is Kyler. Yeah, that's fine. That is, like, I usually don't, in one quarterback leagues, quarterback is pretty replaceable. I really don't like going out of my way because, like, the elite talent at wide receivers and running backs are so much more important. So we can always find, like, Jackson Dart on one quarterback waivers. But in this case, Patrick Mahomes is an elite quarterback that is rivaling Lamar Jackson when he was healthy, Josh Allen, and Jalen Hurts and Drake May, the rushing guys. Because Patrick Mahomes is averaging a career high in rushing points per game. And now we're getting the whole arsenal back that should only heighten his ceiling to the point that we have never seen in fantasy football, honestly. So this kind of deal where you wouldn't start Tet over Rice and Nico anyways, totally fine with trading your depth. We're in week 7. You know, if you have a winning roster, you're trying to get top heavier anyhow. So it may look odd from an outsider's perspective, but the depth doesn't matter as we move closer to the playoffs since you only care about putting out the best players possible. So, yeah, totally fair deal to do Tet for Mahomes. Kyle Murphy, is it time to stash Isaiah Davis with the trade deadline dooming? You can. Maybe Breece Hall gets stashed. Really only bad players get traded at the deadline, though. Like last year was DeAndre Hopkins and Amari Cooper. The NFL isn't really fun at the trade deadline. It's always overvalued, and expectations are never met at the trade deadline. So I don't really go out of my way to make those kind of stashes, but either way, if Breece Hall were injured, Isaiah Davis is a fine stash because he's going to get every single touch as long as Braylon Allen's on injured reserve. That's also the thing with stashing Isaiah Davis is that if it's 2 more weeks and Breece Hall's then traded, Braylon Allen comes back from injured reserve, and then you kind of did everything for nothing. So I think there are better stashes than Isaiah Davis, but you can. Like, he's a fine stash, contingency option, since he is the only back available right now behind Breece Hall. And, for example, could be started in week 8. That's how you look at the contingency options. If this player gets injured, could you start the next player in week 8 or the next week? And, you could start Isaiah Davis in week 8 if Breece Hall was injured this upcoming game. Do I drop all my remaining fab for Kittle? I already have McBride. In tight end premium, yes, Josh Hidalgo. In a normal format, you don't really need that, right? You don't need Kittle because you would continue starting McBride, especially with Jacoby Brissett under center. So I'd dabble. I'd make sure you have a plan. If you were to win Kittle, would your league actually trade for him? Because a lot of times everyone gets ahead of themselves thinking like they're going to build this roster, and then the league actually doesn't want to trade because they're not that active at that position. So as long as someone in your league would take Kittle or McBride, then yes. Otherwise, you can dabble. You don't have to go all 32. You go like 21, leave yourself some outs here. I talked about Jordan Whittington earlier, Kyle, how I believe both him and Tutu are flex plays. You can go back to the beginning of the video when I discussed those guys. Mayfield or May, week 7. It's Drake May. It's still Drake May. We're taking the rushing floor. Drake May is also higher than Baker Mayfield in points per game. Drake May should be started every week. So lots of Drake May questions. May should always be started. You don't even worry about Drake May. Bo Nix, Jordan Love, or Daniel Jones. And I'm personally going to start Daniel Jones among that group. Yards per attempt have decreased in every game. At least we get a indoor environment for Daniel Jones, who has a rushing floor and could be pushed. I hope Joe Alt plays for the Chargers because the offense does not have a ceiling, as they've shown us the last few games, unless Joe Alt is there to protect Justin Herbert and allow him to throw downfield. Because as we talked about last week, Justin Herbert has been bad all season long under pressure. And that's really what's limited Herbert and the Chargers offense so far, the past few games. But Joe Alt was practicing today. There's a chance he plays. If so, that really heightens the entire environment and could force the Colts to push even more, since they really haven't had to in the second half of games so far. So I still like Daniel Jones over those two. Let's see. Need help choosing 2 running backs. Ramondre Henderson, Marks, or Carter. It'd have to be Ramondre, and basically, would you want to start both Patriots backs, or would you rather go Ramondre and Marks? I think in this case, since I already have Ramondre, I'm just going to start him, which is then naturally a bet that he gets all the touches, and then also start Marks over Henderson. Well, if it's a one-on-one situation, I'm starting Henderson over Marks. But since I have Stevenson, I'm going to start Marks alongside Stevenson. Must drop one to make room on my roster for a quarterback. Trey Tucker, RJ Harvey, Tony Pollard, or Chris Godwin. Gosh. I wish we had a better read on Chris Godwin's status, just because we don't know if he's coming back at all. There's been nothing but terrible news so far. I don't think you lose much in dropping Trey Tucker. Like, there's always a Trey Tucker available on the waiver wire. So I would hold Chris Godwin one more week until we get more news. Like I said, it's probably week 10 when we see him again after the Bucs week 9 bye. If he's still after the bye, then we can drop him a couple weeks from now. But right now, I'm just going to drop Trey Tucker. Who would you flex? Jameson Williams, Chris Moore. I'm not going to count the others. If Debo's ruled out, I would start Chris Moore. If Debo plays, I'm going to start Jameson Williams. You'll know that by Sunday. Pick one. Wan'Dale, Diggs, Jameson, Dobbs. I'm going to go back to Diggs for one more game. They're doing the thing where he's still not running the full allotment of routes. Even last week, he's not getting over 80% of the routes run. But we still think someone has to emerge eventually for the Patriots. Maybe it is the situation like we've seen now where it's back and forth. Like Diggs, when you zoom out, has only had 2 out of 4 games that were good. That's it. Or 2 out of 6 games that were good. The rest of the time, everyone wanted to drop him after week 3. He does well in weeks 4 and 5, does terribly last week. And it's Kayshon Boutte. Boutte's role, who did not change at all. He's always been top 2 in routes run among all the Patriots receivers. He's just struggled to earn targets. Last week he gets there because he gets targets downfield because Drake May gets allowed to stand back and not get pressured and look downfield. So, like, it could be a Diggs game, but really what we're asking is that is Diggs a better start than Doubs? And while his floor is not as high, I don't mind taking an L because the ceiling is that much higher. So I'm going to start Diggs. Sarge says May is his QB2 and Daniels is his QB1, but that's where you're wrong, Sarge, because May is your QB1 and Daniels is your QB2. Oh, wait. Jayden Daniels. Yeah, okay. Jayden Daniels. That is your QB1. May is a QB2. If that's the case, you're probably wasting your roster having Drake May, honestly. You should probably roster a backup running back instead that could actually fall into a top 12 start, because you'd never start Drake May over Jayden Daniels unless it's a super flex league. It's kind of a waste of a roster spot. Joseph Massey asks, Kamara, Travis Hunter, I'm assuming, or George Kittle if he plays, and I'm going to go Kamara in a full PPR format, understanding most likely negative game script, but also the target share the last 3 games has not only increased for Kamara, but eaten into and really destroyed the value of Jawan Johnson in that time. Jonathan Santiago asks, Mason Taylor or Kyle Pitts? Mason Taylor's in a much better matchup this week. I don't even consider Kyle Pitts. There are so much better streamers than Kyle Pitts this week. Harold Fannin, Michael Mayer without Brock Bowers. The list goes on. Noah Fant was a better streamer than Kyle Pitts after we got official word that both Tanner Hudson and Mike Gesicki were going to miss last night. So, no, it's definitely Mason Taylor. Given what the Panthers have allowed at tight end in particular. HSJ. Who is HSJ? I don't know HSJ. Chance. So you tell me who HSJ is, and then we'll decide about him or Kendrick Bourne, even though the answer is probably Bourne. If Jacoby Myers were traded, what team do you think would benefit from his fantasy output the most? Oh, I don't know. That's a lot of speculation. It's week 7. I don't know. So I don't know how to answer that. Honestly, it's a trade question. I have no idea. The speculation about where he could go. Like, funny enough, the Patriots could use him in the slot, but that ship has sailed. But you should still hold on to Jacoby Myers, who sounds like he's going to at least miss this game. But then Raiders going by. We will then have Jacoby and Brock Bowers back at full strength, I'm assuming, in week 9. JM, as we talked about earlier, we're not worrying about the Midwest weather on a Friday. Things can change in 24 seconds. So not thinking about start set questions with the weather right now. Sarge asks, Tet or Kittle? It would still be Tet for me, for sure. Just because we think Kittle's going to be at full strength, but we also don't know. And I always lean towards, like I did with Chris Godwin, like Jalen Coker this week, I always lean towards not starting players coming back from injury. And because 90% of the time you will be right. If you just fade that player in their first game back from injury, you do not know their status, similar to Juwan Jennings last week. So, no, I'm not going to start Kittle unless I have to. Your tight end is Tyler Warren. Your wide receivers, Tetaroa. We don't need to start George Kittle in that situation. Chance by Harrison Smith Jr. I think you meant Marvin Harrison Jr. MHJ, not HSJ. I think so. And Kendrick Bourne is a better start than MHJ. Drop Pitts and pick up Hunter Henry. Absolutely. Sit one, G Santo asks, between CD, Rice, Ladd, and Sutton. And that's Ladd McConkey, unfortunately. Normal lineups are not going to sit Ladd McConkey, but in this situation, you don't have a normal lineup, Santos. You have a very good lineup. So if someone good has to sit, regardless of the decision, you are sitting Ladd McConkey because he has the worst matchup among the elite matchups between CeeDee Lamb, Rashee Rice, and Cortland Sutton. Flex Shambaholic asks, between Dubs, Golden, or Atwell. Dobbs for me, for sure. Even last week, Dobbs leads the team with a 30% target share. He is the second highest target share on the team behind Josh Jacobs without Jaden Reed. He leads the team in end zone targets as well. So it's Dobbs quite easily over Golden for me. Also, the biggest news, like I mentioned, be sure to check ahead of Monday Night Football for the Bucs as we wait out Mike Evans. If Mike Evans is out, that's when Cade Otton becomes a better play as opposed to just a streamer, even though he's a streamer no matter what. But as we saw last year, like with Mike Evans back, Cade Otton doesn't get targets because naturally Mike Evans soaks up everything. A couple more here before I get out for the day. Tristan asks, should I trade Kincaid and Marvin Harrison for Devontae Adams? Yes, definitely. Kincaid is someone we should trade high anyways, given how flat the target tree is, as they continue using 7 different players for Buffalo. But Devontae Adams, more importantly, like that's the condensed target tree we love, where Matthew Stafford is only going to Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams when they are healthy. So yes, easily Devontae Adams. G Santos asks, Dowdle, Chuba, or Mason. If I have Mason, well, with Jalen Walker, Carter. I'm going to start Dowdle one more time. And again, I'm saying every time I answer Dowdle, I'm looking ahead and I'm telling everyone, like, I don't know. Again, I would not be shocked if he has 8 carries for 40 yards at all. But I don't think I can personally start him after the last 2 weeks. Regardless of matchups, even for easy matchups, the other players that got those easy matchups didn't set franchise records. So I'm going to start Rico Dowdle. It could very well be wrong. It would not be shocking if it was wrong, but I'm still going to start until otherwise proven incorrect on that assessment of him for the rest of the year. And one more. Let's go another one besides this, Alex, because we talked about Woody Marks earlier. My thoughts are he's going to be fine, and he's still a player I want to buy low because, like, they don't beat the Titans without Woody Marks. The Texans cannot win without Woody Marks because he's one of their best players. But against the Ravens, you kind of just throw that out the door because the Ravens aren't an NFL team. When they are that injured in the defense and Lamar Jackson doesn't play, we know Cooper Rush is not a real quarterback. So Woody Marks is definitely someone I want to buy low on. And I definitely will start if you need to, but a lot of the questions we've had, you don't need to. And finally, Carlos Rodriguez asked, Marvin Harrison Jr., Wan'Dale, and that's assuming MHJ plays. We don't know if he's going to. If he does, I will absolutely start him this week over Wan'Dale. Wan'Dale, who did not lead his own team in targets. That was little Jordan Humphrey. Without both Malik Neighbors and Darius Slayton, that's pretty bad, honestly. Carlos also quickly says Romeo Doubs is also in the mix there. If that's the case, I would start Doubs over Harrison and Wan'Dale, but Wan'Dale would be last on that list since he cannot earn targets without either Slayton or Neighbors, plus the impossible matchup for Jackson Dart on the road in Denver. Look at the last 5 games. The Broncos have had like actual rushing quarterbacks against them, and they've limited them all to less than 10 rushing yards. I'm expecting Jackson Dart to go way under his rushing prop and longest run, way under. Because the Broncos, that's what they do so well, including when they played Justin Fields. So, anyways, with that being said, that's your week 7 Q&A. Doesn't have to be start sit, but it always is. Hopefully I taught some more big picture thoughts along the way. And remember, not only you can find me at Establish the Run, where I do this stuff in the Discord and weekly in my waiver column, but also at NotJDaigle on Twitter. So until then, good luck in week 7. Remember to pay attention to the injury reports this time of the year. And let's come back next week, same time, Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, with the W.